Welcome to our presentation on Motivation and Affect by Chantel Beach, Michelle Pierce, and Michelle Spencer.
Like an iceberg, behavior is what we see on the surface. But under the surface is what motivates a person into action. There are two main types of motivation. Extrinsic motivation is acting on something to either gain or avoid something else. And intrinsic motivation comes from within, such as when people choose to do something out of personal interest or for the pleasure of the activity itself. Some researchers state that you cannot really separate these two as they're intertwined. For example, people have goals and desires that can be intrinsic and extrinsically motivating. The complex concept of motivation has undergone many interpretations in Western philosophy. Darwin introduced the concept of instinct, which is evident in our early history. Human and animals have the drive to meet their physiological needs. However, humans also have the motivation to seek out novel information and experiences, which is evident when we look around at all the advancements we have as a society. Babies' brains are hardwired to connect with their caregivers. They have an internal drive to cry when they're hungry, tired, or need comfort. And through those met needs, children's affect is developed. Young children's behavior is shaped through the social and emotional responses of their caregivers. Extrinsic reinforcers like a smile, praise, or rewards for behavior can foster a sense of acceptance that the children are seeking from their caregivers. By 11 months old, children learn what emotions their caregivers are comfortable and uncomfortable with. Often anger, shame, and sadness can be harder emotions for parents to support their children with. Parents' approach to disciplining their children can in fact be providing internal messages to the child and impact their future motivation. As humans, we have a desire to be social. This is why children seek connection with their parents, and through praise and rewards, they learn what behaviors to display. This can be subtle. However, parents in Western society often overpraise children, hoping to increase self-esteem, but constant praise actually lowers self-esteem and causes reliance on external feedback. When children are praised for their ability rather than effort, they tend to avoid tasks that they don't think they'll be good at. According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, humans have a desire to be loved and feel a sense of belonging. This social impact of intrinsic motivation goes beyond the child's home and is evident in schools and community. People can be extrinsically motivated to do things for the approval of others or to develop social connections. Western school systems are entrenched in the reward system, with good intentions to motivate students to learn. However, research has proven that giving rewards for an activity someone already enjoys negatively impacts the internal drive to do the activity. Rewards can be helpful when intrinsic motivation is low, but over time rewards reach a saturation point and lose their power. As children grow, they observe and compare themselves to their peers. Due to past failures, children lose confidence in their abilities, subsequently losing motivation to engage in certain tasks. Cultural factors can impact people's beliefs and values, which then influences expectations, desires, and goals. People can internalize what they want or fear, but this is a learned response from social and environmental experiences. There are cultural differences in motivation, and people may be motivated to do things because they are valued by their culture. For example, in industrialized cultures, autonomy may be a motivator, while in collectivist cultures, people are more motivated by tasks that support their community. The messages that people receive from society due to their diversity of gender, race, or ability can impact motivation by hindering the beliefs of what can be accomplished. Intrinsic motivation comes from within. This includes our cognitions, emotions, needs, and drives. Cognitions include our beliefs, thoughts, and self-concept. It can be viewed as the information-seeking component of intrinsic motivation. Cognition serves motivation through the gathering and processing of information, assisting people in discovering the most efficient ways to have their needs met. Cognition cannot truly be separated from emotions and drives. For example, when people have an interest, eating at their favorite restaurant, their emotion, their drive, and their cognition all work together. An advantage to intrinsic motivation is that people often gain pleasure simply by partaking in the motivating task or activity. There are differences in what people find intrinsically motivating based on personal interests, goals, and values. Flow is a particular intense form of intrinsic motivation where a person gets lost in an activity because they are completely absorbed in it. How people feel depends on whether their needs and goals are being met. For example, boredom is an unpleasant feeling that arises from lack of stimulation or arousal. Boredom can cause a person to evaluate whether the activity they are engaged in is serving a purpose. If the answer is no, they'll likely disengage from the activity, but if the answer is yes, they'll find a way to re-engage. There's a lot to consider when we think about motivation. Maslow's hierarchy of needs offers a helpful way to conceptualize the multiple levels and types of humans' wants and desires. The first four mentioned include our biological and psychological needs, which are called deficiency needs because they resulted from things a person lacks. Self-actualization is declared a growth need because it enhances individual development and is rarely fully satisfied. It is important for counselors to have an understanding of motivation, and one theory that can encapsulate what has been discussed about motivation is self-determination theory. This was put forth in 1985 by Edward Deci and Richard Ryan in an effort to provide a framework of motivation and personality. Their framework defined intrinsic and extrinsic motivation through the lens of cognition, social and cultural factors, and individual differences. They shifted from looking at biological drives of motivation to 3 psychological needs that assist in finding optimal functioning, namely autonomy, competence, and relatedness. The psychological need for autonomy is met through the individual's subjective experience of exploring their interests, engaging in activities to fulfill those interests, and choosing freely what they're willing to do in this pursuit. The psychological need for competence supports autonomy. The willingness to engage in activities is tempered by the individual's perception of their ability and capacity to interact with the environment. By building a sense of competence through experiencing and eventually mastering challenges, the individual becomes empowered to continue to strive towards growth. The final psychological need, relatedness, is recognized as the need to be emotionally close and understood by others, as the self-determination theory recognizes that psychological needs may grow or be hindered based on the ongoing support through the social environment. One way to support the psychological needs is through counseling. An example would be motivational interviewing, which complements the self-determination theory framework. Motivational interviewing develops the therapeutic relationship through having empathy, respect, and positive regard, much like person-centered therapy. It provides a safe environment which can promote motivation for change. Once the therapeutic relationship is formed, the counselor can explore motivation by listening to the client and hearing the change talk and the resistance to change, called sustained talk. This is based on the client's perception and values. As we develop the therapeutic alliance, it can foster a sense of validation and understanding, facilitating the psychological needs for relatedness, which when addressed can allow them to be motivated to take on new tasks. But just exploring the client's desire and ability for change is not sufficient. You need to make a clear plan. Clients' motivation to act on changes in their life will increase. If the client has been mandated or externally coerced to attend counseling, this can assist them to shift on the continuum from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation, as it becomes personally important. This promotes autonomy as the reason to continue the therapeutic process becomes a choice, not an obligation. When the client is debating whether to change or sustain, their perceived abilities will be part of the debate, which can facilitate the psychological need for competence as they realize their strengths. Through the final step of increasing commitment talk, goals can be reflected on, and that would include whatever steps are needed to increase competency, thereby increasing the likelihood of moving towards change. But the client is always in charge of this process, including when the change process will begin, which increases autonomy. An important aspect of motivational interviewing is for the counselor to be able to ask open-ended questions and to reflect and facilitate the client's deeper investigation on the what and how of establishing goals. This can promote relatedness and enhance the client's autonomy and competency, thereby promoting the fulfillment of the psychological needs, which can motivate the client to strive for change. Counselors may make the assumption that clients come into the counseling room intrinsically motivated to change. However, extrinsic and intrinsic motivation are intertwined, and we need to support the client's autonomy, competency, and relatedness. We can do this through finding out how their cognitions, their affect, and social factors influence their motivation. We need to provide choices to promote autonomy. We need to build on strengths and successes and help the client understand their desires and values to motivate change. How a person motivates themselves is a unique experience. Yet as counselors, our role is to support clients to meet their desired change. Self-reflect on what types of motivation you've used in your life and how may your personal ideas of motivation impact your work with clients. Then look at this case study. John faces the problem of obesity, and he's been mandated to attend weight management programs. Utilizing your therapeutic framework and your understanding of motivation, how would you support John to make healthy lifestyle changes?